When Morgan Freeman watched his housekeeper Maria struggle up the stairs of his Mississippi mansion, dragging her left leg behind her like a broken anchor, he had no idea that this single moment would expose a truth so heartbreaking it would move him to make a decision that stunned the entire entertainment industry. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button, and if you're new here, subscribe to hear more stories about the extraordinary moments that reveal people's true character. Now let me take you back to how it all began. It was a Tuesday morning in October 2019 when Freeman first noticed something wasn't right. Maria Rodriguez had been cleaning his home for nearly 8 years, moving through the spacious rooms with the efficiency of someone who took genuine pride in her work. She knew every corner of the 124-acre estate, every piece of furniture, every photo that needed dusting. But on this particular morning, something was different. Freeman sat in his study, reviewing scripts for his upcoming projects, when he heard it, a distinct dragging sound coming from the hallway. It wasn't the usual rhythmic footsteps he'd grown accustomed to over the years. This was labored, uneven, accompanied by what sounded like muffled breathing. He looked up from his papers and watched through the doorway as Maria made her way down the corridor. Her normally straight posture was tilted to one side, her left hand gripping the wall for support. Each step seemed to require enormous effort, and Freeman noticed how she paused every few feet, as if gathering strength for the next movement. "Maria!" he called out, his distinctive voice carrying its usual warmth but tinged with concern. She turned quickly, too quickly, and Freeman saw her wince as she put weight on her left leg. "Yes, Mr. Freeman? Do you need something? Are you all right? You seem to be having some trouble walking." Maria's face flushed, and she immediately straightened up, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh no, sir. Just a little stiffness from the weather. You know how it is when the seasons change." But Freeman knew it wasn't the weather. He'd been observing people for decades, studying human behavior for his craft, and Maria's movements told a story she was trying desperately to hide. The way she shifted her weight entirely to her right leg, how her knuckles went white as she gripped the wall, the barely perceptible grimace that crossed her face with each step, these weren't signs of seasonal stiffness. "Maria, how long have you been limping?" The question hung in the air like a challenge she couldn't deflect. For a moment, her composed facade cracked, and Freeman saw something that made his heart sink. Fear. Not fear of him, but fear of what admitting the truth might cost her. "It's really nothing, Mr. Freeman. I can still do my job perfectly well. I've never missed a day, and I won't let this slow me down." The desperation in her voice told Freeman everything he needed to know. This wasn't about pride or stubbornness. This was about survival. Maria wasn't hiding her condition because she was embarrassed. She was hiding it because she was terrified of losing the job that kept her family afloat. As Freeman watched her continue down the hallway, each step a visible struggle she was determined to disguise, he made a mental note to pay closer attention. Something told him that what he was witnessing was just the tip of an iceberg, and the full truth was probably far more serious than Maria was letting on. He had no idea just how right he was, or how dramatically his next discovery would change both their lives forever. What Morgan Freeman didn't know was that Maria Rodriguez had been fighting a battle far more devastating than he could have imagined, and every morning when she arrived at his estate, she was performing the greatest acting job of her life. Maria's day began at 4:30 a.m. in her small apartment in Charleston, Mississippi, nearly an hour's drive from Freeman's property. The alarm clock's shrill ring was always the second most painful part of her day. The first was the moment she tried to stand up. The shooting pain that ran from her hip down to her ankle was like lightning trapped in her bones. Degenerative arthritis had been eating away at her joints for 3 years, but in the past 6 months, it had become a relentless predator. Some mornings, the pain was so intense that tears ran down her cheeks before her feet even touched the floor. But Maria had perfected a routine of survival. She would sit on the edge of her bed for 10 minutes, massaging her leg and whispering prayers in Spanish. Then came the slow, careful process of standing, using every piece of furniture as support, until she reached the kitchen, where she would swallow 3 ibuprofen tablets, the maximum dose that her worn-down stomach could handle. The drive to Freeman's estate was torture disguised as transportation. Every bump in the road sent shockwaves through her deteriorating joints, but she couldn't afford to miss work. The $600 she earned each week cleaning Freeman's home wasn't just her income. It was the lifeline that kept her son Carlos in community college and put food on their table. Maria had been to the free clinic twice, where overworked doctors had given her the diagnosis she already feared: severe degenerative joint disease that would only get worse without proper treatment. The recommended surgery would cost $45,000, a sum that might as well have been $45 million for a woman who earned less than $32,000 a year. "Mrs. Rodriguez," the doctor had said during her last visit, "without intervention, you'll be in a wheelchair within 2 years. The deterioration is accelerating." A wheelchair. The words had echoed in Maria's mind for weeks. How could she clean houses from a wheelchair? How could she support Carlos through school? How would they survive? So Maria made a choice that millions of working-class Americans make every day. She decided to hide her condition and keep working until her body absolutely refused to cooperate. She bought a cane but left it in her car, afraid that Mr. Freeman would see it and decide she couldn't perform her duties effectively. Every room she cleaned became a strategic battlefield. She mapped out routes that minimized walking, used furniture to steady herself, and developed techniques to clean lower surfaces without having to kneel or bend. When the pain became unbearable, she would lock herself in a bathroom and cry silently for 2 minutes, then splash cold water on her face and continue working. Freeman had always been kind to her, more generous than any employer she'd ever had. He paid her fairly, gave her Christmas bonuses, and always asked about Carlos's studies. But kindness didn't change the fundamental reality of her situation. She was an employee, easily replaceable, and admitting weakness could mean losing everything. Maria had seen it happen to other housekeepers in wealthy neighborhoods, a suggestion of health problems, a hint that they might not be able to maintain their standards, and suddenly they were thanked for their service and replaced with someone younger and healthier. So she perfected the art of invisible suffering. She learned to time her movements for when Freeman was in his study or out of the house. She developed a way of walking that distributed her weight differently, masking the worst of the limp. She even practiced facial expressions in her car mirror, ensuring she never showed pain when he might be watching. But bodies have limits, and Maria's was rapidly approaching hers. The morning Freeman first noticed her limping was the morning her carefully constructed facade began to crumble. She had woken up with the worst pain yet, the kind that made her question whether she could make it through the day. As she drove home that afternoon, Maria's hands shook on the steering wheel. Not from the pain this time, but from fear. Mr. Freeman had noticed. The question now was whether her 8 years of faithful service would be enough to buy her time to figure out a solution, or if this was the beginning of the end of the only stable income her family had ever known. She had no way of knowing that Freeman's concern wasn't the threat she feared. It was the beginning of a miracle she never could have imagined. Morgan Freeman had built his reputation on patience, both as an actor who could convey profound emotion with the subtlest gesture and as a man who believed in observing before acting. But watching Maria struggle through her daily routines was testing every ounce of that patience, not because she was failing at her job, but because he could see the extraordinary effort it took for her to succeed. Over the next 2 weeks, Freeman became an inadvertent detective in his own home. He found himself timing his movements to catch glimpses of Maria when she thought she was unobserved. What he discovered broke his heart. He saw her gripping the banister with white knuckles as she climbed the stairs to clean the second floor, pausing halfway up to catch her breath. He witnessed her cleaning the lower cabinets in his kitchen while sitting on a small stool she'd brought from home, though she would quickly stand whenever she heard his footsteps approaching. Most tellingly, he noticed that she had reorganized her entire cleaning routine to minimize walking. Tasks that used to take her 6 hours now stretched to 8, not because she was working slower, but because she had to rest so frequently. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday morning when Freeman heard a crash from the living room. He rushed in to find Maria on her hands and knees, picking up pieces of a crystal vase that had shattered on the hardwood floor. Her left leg was twisted at an unnatural angle beneath her, and tears of pain streamed down her face. "Maria!" Freeman rushed to help her up, but she waved him away frantically. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Freeman. I'll replace it, I promise. Please don't. I can pay for it out of my salary." The desperation in her voice stunned him. This woman, who had been nothing but reliable and trustworthy for 8 years, was terrified that breaking an accident would cost her everything. As he helped her to a chair, Freeman noticed something that made everything click into place. Her left leg was swollen to nearly twice the size of her right, stretching the fabric of her uniform pants. "Maria," Freeman said, his voice gentle but firm, "I need you to tell me the truth. How long have you been in pain?" The question seemed to deflate her. Her shoulders sagged. and for the first time since he'd known her, Maria Rodriguez looked defeated. "About 3 years," she whispered. "But it's gotten much worse recently. Have you seen a doctor?" "Yes, sir, at the free clinic. They said I need surgery, but I can't afford it, and I can't afford not to work." Her voice cracked. "Mr. Freeman, please don't fire me. I know I'm slower now, but I can still do the job. I'll work extra hours to make up for it. I'll take a pay cut if you need me to." Freeman felt something shift inside his chest, a combination of admiration for Maria's incredible determination and fury at a system that forced a hard-working woman to choose between her health and her survival. This was a woman who had cleaned his home with meticulous care for nearly a decade, who had never stolen so much as a paperclip, who had worked through flu, family emergencies, and apparently excruciating pain because she was too afraid to show weakness. "Maria, I'm not going to fire you, but I need you to help me understand exactly what's going on. What kind of surgery do you need?" Through tears, Maria explained her diagnosis: severe degenerative arthritis in her hip and knee joints, requiring multiple procedures to replace the damaged joints and extensive physical therapy afterward. The total cost, $45,000, not including the months of recovery time when she wouldn't be able to work. "I've been saving every penny I can," she said, "but at this rate it would take me 15 years to save enough, and the doctor said I don't have that long." Freeman sat quietly for a long moment, processing what he'd learned. Here was a woman who had spent years caring for his home, and had never asked for anything beyond her agreed-upon wage. She had hidden her condition not out of shame, but out of fear of being seen as a burden. She was willing to work herself into disability rather than risk losing the job that supported her family. In that moment, Freeman saw something that reminded him why he'd been drawn to acting in the first place: the profound dignity of human beings facing impossible circumstances with grace. Maria wasn't just his housekeeper. She was a testament to the quiet heroism that played out in homes across America every day. "Maria," Freeman said finally, "I want you to take the rest of the day off. Go home, rest that leg, and don't worry about the vase. But before you go, I need to ask you one more question." She looked up at him, eyes still wet with tears. "If money wasn't an issue, would you have the surgery?" "In a heartbeat," she answered, without hesitation. "I want to see my son graduate college. I want to dance at his wedding someday. I want to grow old without being a burden on anyone." Freeman nodded slowly. "Go home, Maria. We'll talk more tomorrow." As he watched her carefully make her way to her car, Freeman was already formulating a plan that would shock everyone who knew him, including Maria herself. He had spent his career bringing characters to life on screen, but now he was about to prove that the most powerful stories weren't fiction at all. They were the moments when one person's compassion collided with another person's need, creating possibilities that neither could have imagined alone. That evening, Morgan Freeman sat in his study, with Maria's words echoing in his mind. "I want to see my son graduate college. I want to dance at his wedding someday." The simple humanity of those dreams, spoken by a woman who was sacrificing her mobility to ensure her family's survival, had awakened something in him that went beyond mere sympathy. Freeman picked up his phone and called his personal physician, Dr. James Morrison, a man he'd known for over 20 years. "Jim, I need you to help me understand something about joint replacement surgery," Freeman began, then proceeded to describe Maria's condition in detail. Dr. Morrison listened carefully. "Morgan, what you're describing sounds like severe degenerative arthritis. The good news is that joint replacement surgery has excellent success rates when performed by skilled surgeons. The bad news is that without insurance, the costs can be overwhelming for most people." "What would be involved in getting her the best possible care?" "Well, if we're talking about the best, I'd recommend Dr. Sarah Mitchell at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis. She's one of the top orthopedic surgeons in the region, specializes in complex joint replacements. But Morgan, her fees alone would be around $25,000, not counting hospital costs, anesthesia, physical therapy." Freeman was quiet for a moment. "Jim, what if I told you that cost wasn't a factor?" The next morning, Freeman called his business manager, a sharp woman named Patricia Wells, who had been handling his finances for 15 years. "Patricia, I need you to set aside $75,000 from my personal account for a medical procedure. Are you having health issues, Morgan? Do you need me to coordinate with your insurance?" "It's not for me. It's for Maria, my housekeeper. I want to pay for her surgery and recovery." Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "Morgan, that's incredibly generous, but have you thought this through? There could be tax implications, and Honestly, it sets a precedent that— Patricia, Freeman interrupted gently, I'm not asking for financial advice. I'm telling you what I want to do. Can you make it happen? Of course. But Morgan, may I ask why? Freeman looked out his window toward the driveway where Maria would arrive in an hour, probably having taken extra pain medication just to make it through another day of work. Because it's the right thing to do, and because I can. When Maria arrived that Thursday morning, Freeman was waiting for her in the kitchen. She moved even more slowly than usual, and he noticed she was using the wall for support more frequently. Maria, please sit down. We need to talk. The fear that flashed across her face nearly broke his heart. She thought this was the conversation she'd been dreading, the one where he would gently let her go. Mr. Freeman, I know yesterday was difficult, but I promise you, I can do better. I've been practicing walking at home and I think I've figured out how to move more efficiently. Maria, stop. Freeman's voice was kind but firm. I didn't ask you to sit down so I could fire you. I asked you to sit down so I could tell you that I've spoken to one of the best orthopedic surgeons in Memphis, and she's agreed to see you next Tuesday. Maria blinked, not understanding. I can't afford to see a specialist, Mr. Freeman. The clinic doctors already told me. I know what they told you. I also know that Dr. Sarah Mitchell is going to perform whatever surgeries you need to fix your legs and get you back to full mobility. But I can't. The money— Freeman leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers directly. Maria, I'm going to pay for your surgery, all of it. The hospital, the doctors, the physical therapy, everything. The words hit Maria like a physical blow. She stared at Freeman for a long moment, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Finally, she managed to whisper, I don't understand. It's very simple. You've taken care of my home for 8 years with more dedication than I had any right to expect. You've hidden a painful medical condition because you were afraid of losing your job, which tells me more about your character than a dozen reference letters could. Now it's my turn to take care of you. Tears began flowing down Maria's cheeks. Mr. Freeman, I can't accept this. It's too much. I could never pay you back. I'm not asking you to pay me back. I'm asking you to get healthy so you can see your son graduate college and dance at his wedding. The reference to her own words from the day before made Maria break down completely. She put her face in her hands and sobbed, not from pain this time, but from the overwhelming relief of having a burden she'd carried for years suddenly lifted from her shoulders. I don't know what to say, she managed through her tears. Freeman handed her a tissue and smiled. Say you'll let Dr. Mitchell help you. Say you'll take the time you need to recover properly. And say you'll come back to work when you're ready, because this house isn't the same without you. Maria looked up at him through her tears, seeing not a famous actor or a wealthy employer, but simply a man who had chosen compassion over indifference. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this for me? Freeman's answer was simple, profound, and would later be quoted in newspapers around the world. Because you matter, Maria. Your dreams matter. Your family matters. And because I have the ability to help, which means I have the responsibility to help. As the reality of what Freeman was offering began to sink in, Maria realized that her life and her son's future had just been transformed by an act of kindness so extraordinary it would restore her faith not just in her employer, but in humanity itself. But even she couldn't have imagined how Freeman's gesture would ripple out beyond their personal situation, creating waves that would inspire thousands of people around the world. The appointment with Dr. Sarah Mitchell was scheduled for the following Tuesday, but Freeman had one more surprise that would leave Maria questioning whether she was living in reality or an impossible dream. There's something else we need to discuss, Freeman said as Maria wiped her tears and tried to compose herself. The surgery and recovery process will take several months. You'll need at least 6 weeks before you can even think about light duty, and probably 3 months before you're back to full capacity. Maria's expression shifted from joy back to worry. I understand, Mr. Freeman. I know you'll need to hire someone else during that time. I hope there might be a position for me when I'm better. Freeman shook his head. You're not understanding me, Maria. I'm not replacing you temporarily or otherwise. I'm paying your full salary throughout your recovery period. Maria's eyes widened. But I won't be working. You can't pay me for not working. Watch me. Freeman's smile was gentle but determined. You've earned 8 years of sick leave as far as I'm concerned. Besides, I've decided this house can stay a little dusty for a few months. It might do me good to live like a normal person for a while. Mr. Freeman, this is too much. The surgery is already more than I could ever repay. I can't take your money for doing nothing. Freeman leaned back in his chair, studying Maria's face. Even in the midst of receiving life-changing generosity, she was worried about fairness, about earning her keep. It reinforced his conviction that he had chosen the right person to help. "Let me tell you something, Maria. I've made a lot of money in my career, more than I could spend in several lifetimes. That money is meaningless if it just sits in accounts accumulating interest. But using it to help someone who has shown me nothing but loyalty and dedication for 8 years, that gives it purpose." He paused, then continued. "Besides, you won't be doing nothing. Your job during recovery will be to get better, to do your physical therapy, to heal properly, to spend time with Carlos and enjoy not being in constant pain. That's work too, and it's important work." Maria was quiet for a long time, processing the magnitude of what Freeman was offering. Finally, she spoke. "Mr. Freeman, I need you to know something. I'm not a charity case. I've worked since I was 14 years old. I've never asked anyone for handouts, and I've always paid my own way." "I know that, Maria. That's exactly why I want to help you. This isn't charity, it's recognition. You've given me 8 years of service that went far beyond what any job description could capture. You've cared for my home like it was your own. You've worked through pain that would have sent most people to the emergency room. This isn't a handout. It's a thank you that's 8 years overdue." Freeman stood up and walked to his desk, returning with a folder. "I had my lawyer draw up some paperwork. It's a medical leave agreement that guarantees your position here for up to 6 months, with full pay and benefits. There's also contact information for Dr. Mitchell's office. They're expecting your call." Maria opened the folder with trembling hands, seeing official documents that laid out exactly what Freeman had promised. Everything was there in black and white. Surgery costs covered, salary continuation, job protection. "I need to ask you something," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if the surgery doesn't work? What if I come back and I'm still not able to do the job properly?" Freeman's expression grew serious. "Then we'll figure out something else. Maybe you become more of a house manager, coordinating with outside services. Maybe we modify your duties. The point is, Maria, you have a place here, as long as you want one. Your value to me isn't just about how fast you can vacuum or how high you can reach to dust." "What is it about then?" Freeman smiled. "It's about the fact that in 8 years, I've never come home to a house that didn't feel welcoming. It's about knowing that someone cares for my space with the same attention they'd give their own. It's about trust, reliability, and the peace of mind that comes from knowing someone genuinely good is looking after the place I call home." Maria looked down at the papers again, still struggling to believe what was happening. "Mr. Freeman, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Have you done this for other people? Other employees?" Freeman considered the question carefully. "I've helped people over the years, yes, but nothing quite like this. There's something about your situation that struck me differently. Maybe it's because I've watched you struggle and refuse to complain. Maybe it's because you were willing to work yourself into a wheelchair rather than ask for help. I don't know exactly what it is, but I know it's right." Maria closed the folder and looked directly at Freeman. "I accept your help, Mr. Freeman, and I promise you when I come back I'll work harder than I ever have before." "I'm not worried about that, Maria. I'm just looking forward to seeing you walk up those stairs without pain." As Maria prepared to leave that day, Freeman added one final detail that would later become part of the legend surrounding his gesture. "Oh, and Maria, take Carlos with you to the doctor appointment. I think he should understand what's happening, and tell him that his mother's employer thinks he's lucky to have her." That evening, when Maria called her son to tell him about Freeman's incredible offer, Carlos was quiet for a long time before speaking. "Mom, are you sure this is real? People don't just do things like this." Maria looked at the folder of paperwork on her kitchen table, still hardly believing it herself. "I thought the same thing, mijo, but sometimes I guess they do." Neither of them could have predicted that Freeman's act of kindness was about to become much more than a private gesture between an employer and employee. Within weeks, their story would capture international attention and inspire similar acts of generosity around the world. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's office was unlike any medical facility Maria had ever visited. Located in a gleaming medical complex in Memphis, it felt more like an elegant hotel lobby than a hospital, with marble floors, soft lighting, and artwork that probably cost more than Maria earned in a year. Carlos had driven her to the appointment, both of them nervous about being in such an upscale environment. They sat in the waiting room, Maria clutching the referral letter Freeman had provided, when a woman in scrubs approached them. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm Jennifer, Dr. Mitchell's nurse coordinator. She's ready to see you now." Dr. Mitchell was a woman in her early 50s, with greying hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She greeted Maria warmly and immediately put her at ease. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I understand Mr. Freeman has asked me to take a look at your situation. Can you tell me about your pain levels and how long this has been going on?" Over the next hour, Dr. Mitchell conducted the most thorough examination Maria had ever received. X-rays, MRI scans, flexibility tests, and detailed questions about her daily activities. Finally, she sat down with Maria and Carlos to discuss her findings. "The good news is that you're an excellent candidate for surgery. The bad news is that your condition is quite advanced. I'm frankly amazed you've been working at all. Most people with this degree of joint deterioration would be using mobility aids." "What exactly needs to be done?" Carlos asked. "Your mother needs a complete left hip replacement and a partial knee reconstruction. It's major surgery, but the success rate is very high. Within 6 months, she should have full mobility and be completely pain-free." Maria felt tears welling up again. Pain-free were words she'd almost forgotten existed. Dr. Mitchell continued, "I have to ask, Mrs. Rodriguez, how exactly did Mr. Freeman come to arrange this? It's not common for employers to cover this level of medical care." Maria explained the story, from her attempts to hide the limp to Freeman's insistence on helping. Dr. Mitchell listened with growing amazement. "In 30 years of practice, I've never seen anything quite like this. Most people, even wealthy people, might offer to help with insurance or provide a small loan, but to cover everything, plus salary during recovery, that's extraordinary." What Dr. Mitchell didn't tell Maria was that Freeman had already called her personally, not just to arrange the surgery, but to ensure that Maria would receive what he called presidential-level care. "Doctor," Freeman had said during their conversation, "I want Maria to have the absolute best of everything. The best room, the best physical therapy, the best chance of a complete recovery. Money is no object." Dr. Mitchell had been so impressed by Freeman's sincerity that she decided to take a personal interest in Maria's case, something she rarely did with non-celebrity patients. The surgery was scheduled for the following Thursday. As word began to spread among the medical staff about the famous actor who was paying for his housekeeper's surgery, the story started to take on a life of its own. A nurse mentioned it to her husband, who told a friend who worked at the local newspaper. A physical therapist posted about it on social media, impressed by Freeman's generosity. By the time Maria was admitted to the hospital, several media outlets had gotten wind of the story. Freeman, who had hoped to keep the gesture private, found himself fielding calls from reporters. "Mr. Freeman, can you comment on reports that you're paying for your housekeeper's surgery?" "Mr. Freeman, what motivated you to make such a generous gesture? Is this part of a larger charitable foundation?" Freeman's publicist advised him to decline all interviews, but Freeman had a different idea. If the story was going to come out anyway, he wanted to control the message. "I'll do one interview," he told his publicist. "Set something up with CNN, but I want the focus to be on Maria, not on me. And I want people to understand that this isn't about Hollywood charity. It's about recognizing the value of good people." The CNN interview, conducted by Anderson Cooper, aired 3 days after Maria's surgery. Freeman sat in his study, the same room where he'd first decided to help Maria, and spoke with quiet conviction. "Anderson, this story isn't about me being generous. It's about recognizing that Maria Rodriguez has been extraordinary for 8 years. She's worked through pain that would have stopped most people. She's cared for my home like it was a sacred trust. When I learned she was suffering because she couldn't afford health care, the question wasn't whether to help. It was how quickly I could make it happen." Cooper pressed him about the cost. "Mr. Freeman, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. That's a life-changing amount of money for most people." Freeman's response became the most quoted part of the interview. "Money is only life-changing when you don't have enough of it. For me, this amount was meaningful but not life-changing. For Maria, it was the difference between disability and dancing at her son's wedding. That's a pretty easy calculation." When asked if he was concerned about setting a precedent or being taken advantage of, Freeman was philosophical. "I'm not worried about people trying to take advantage of kindness. I'm worried about a world where kindness becomes so rare that it makes headlines when someone helps a person who deserves help." The interview struck a chord with millions of viewers. Within hours, Jack Morgan Freeman was trending on social media, but not for a movie role or award. People were sharing their own stories of employers who had shown extraordinary kindness, and others were inspired to help their own employees or community members in need. But the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. The day after the interview aired, Freeman received a call from Carlos Rodriguez. "Mr. Freeman, this is Carlos, Maria's son. I wanted to thank you for what you said about my mother on TV. You didn't have to do that interview, but I'm glad you did. Now the whole world knows what kind of person she is." Freeman was touched by the young man's gratitude. "Carlos, I only told the truth. Your mother is remarkable. Mr. Freeman, there's something I want you to know. When I graduate college next year, it won't just be because of the education I received. It'll be because my mother showed me what it means to work with dignity, even when it hurts. And it'll be because you showed me what it means to recognize that dignity in others." As Freeman hung up the phone, he realized that his gesture had accomplished something he hadn't intended, but was deeply grateful for. It had shown Carlos Rodriguez that there were people in the world who would notice and reward his mother's quiet heroism. That lesson, Freeman thought, might be the most valuable part of the entire experience. 3 weeks after Maria's surgery, while she was still recovering at home and learning to walk with her new hip, Freeman began receiving letters. Not the usual fan mail or business correspondence, but something entirely different. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of letters from people around the world, sharing their own stories of kindness and asking how they could help others in similar situations. The first letter that caught his attention came from a restaurant owner in Phoenix. "Mr. Freeman, your story about Maria inspired me to look more closely at my own employees. I discovered that one of my waitresses has been working double shifts to pay for her daughter's asthma medication. Yesterday, I told her that our restaurant will cover all of her daughter's medical costs. She cried right there in front of the customers, and I realized I should have been paying attention sooner." Another came from a CEO in Chicago. "Dear Mr. Freeman, I saw your interview and realized I've been blind to my own employees' struggles. My assistant mentioned in passing that she takes the bus because her car was repossessed. I just bought her a reliable used car and set up an emergency fund for all my employees. The look on her face when I handed her the keys reminded me why I went into business in the first place, to create opportunities for people." But the letter that moved Freeman most came from a teenage girl in Ohio. "Mr. Freeman, I'm 16 years old, and my mom cleans houses like Maria. She comes home every night with her hands cracked from cleaning supplies and her back aching from bending over all day. She never complains, but I see how hard it is for her. Your story made me realize that people like my mom are heroes, even if nobody famous notices them. I'm studying harder in school now because I want to be successful enough someday to help people like you helped Maria." Freeman found himself emotionally overwhelmed by the response. His simple act of helping an employee had somehow triggered a global conversation about how we value and treat the people who perform essential but often invisible labor. The media attention continued for weeks. Talk show hosts discussed the story, economists analyzed the broader implications of employer-provided healthcare, and social media was filled with posts tagged, "Be more like Morgan and Maria Matters." But the most surprising development came from Hollywood itself. Freeman began receiving calls from other celebrities who wanted to help their own employees, but weren't sure how to do it appropriately. "Morgan, this is Tom," came one call from Tom Hanks. "Rita and I saw your interview, and it got us thinking about our household staff. Our housekeeper mentioned that her husband needs dental work they can't afford. Would you mind if I called your lawyer to ask how you structured Maria's assistance? We want to help, but we want to do it right." Within 2 months, Freeman's lawyer had fielded inquiries from dozens of high-profile clients wanting to set up similar assistance programs for their employees. What had started as one man helping one woman had evolved into an informal network of wealthy individuals quietly transforming the lives of the people who worked for them. The most unexpected call came from Maria herself, 6 weeks after her surgery. "Mr. Freeman, I'm walking." Her voice was filled with joy and disbelief. "I walked to the mailbox and back without any pain. I can't remember the last time I did that." "That's wonderful, Maria. How are you feeling overall?" "Like a different person. But Mr. Freeman, I need to tell you something. People have been calling me." Freeman was puzzled. "What kind of people?" "Reporters mostly, but also people who saw the story on TV. Some of them want to help other housekeepers and janitors and home health aides. There's a woman in California who wants to start a fund to help cleaning ladies get medical care. A man in Texas who owns a chain of restaurants wants to provide health insurance for all his kitchen staff." Freeman smiled. This was beyond anything he had imagined when he first decided to help Maria. "There's something else," Maria continued. Carlos wants to switch his major. Oh? What does he want to study now? Social work. He says he wants to help connect people who need assistance with people who can provide it. He says your example showed him that there are good people in the world, but sometimes they just don't know where their help is needed most. Freeman felt a warmth spread through his chest. Carlos changing his career path to help others was a legacy he had never anticipated, but was deeply proud of. The ripple effects extended far beyond individual acts of kindness. Labor organizations began using Freeman's story to advocate for better employer-provided health care. Medical professionals started discussions about sliding-scale payment systems for essential workers, and several states introduced legislation to provide tax incentives for employers who covered their workers' medical emergencies. Dr. Sarah Mitchell called Freeman with an update that particularly pleased him. Mr. Freeman, I wanted you to know that Maria's recovery is going exceptionally well. She'll be ready to return to light duty in about 3 weeks, but there's something else I wanted to tell you. Since your story broke, I've had 5 other patients whose employers stepped up to help with medical costs. Your gesture is literally healing people beyond just Maria. The most touching development came from an unexpected source. Other housekeepers and domestic workers who had been inspired by Maria's story to seek help for their own medical issues. Freeman received a letter from a cleaning lady in Denver. Mr. Freeman, I've been cleaning offices for 12 years with a hernia that makes every day painful. I never told my boss because I was afraid of losing my job, but after seeing what you did for Maria, I decided to tell him about my condition. Yesterday, he told me he's going to help me get the surgery I need. He said if it was good enough for Morgan Freeman's employee, it was good enough for his. Thank you for showing us that we deserve to be healthy too. Freeman realized that the story had given dignity and voice to countless workers who had been suffering in silence, afraid to reveal their vulnerabilities to their employers. By treating Maria's health as valuable and worth investing in, he had sent a message to working people everywhere that their well-being mattered. The transformation was perhaps most visible in Freeman's own community. Local businesses in Charleston and surrounding areas began implementing employee assistance programs. The story had made national news, but its impact was deeply personal for people who lived and worked near Freeman's estate. A month before Maria was scheduled to return to work, Freeman received a call from the mayor of Charleston. Mr. Freeman, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I wanted to let you know about something that's been happening here since your story broke. We've had 8 local businesses contact City Hall asking about setting up employee hardship funds. The bank is offering interest-free medical loans to working families. Even the hospital has created a sliding-scale payment program for essential workers. Freeman was amazed. I had no idea the impact was reaching that far. Mr. Freeman, you didn't just help one woman. You reminded an entire community that taking care of each other isn't just charity. It's what makes a place worth living in. As Freeman prepared for Maria's return to work, he reflected on how a simple decision to help someone in need had created waves of compassion that reached far beyond anything he could have imagined. But the most important part of the story was still to come. Maria's first day back at work, and the conversation that would define the lasting meaning of everything that had happened. On the morning Maria was scheduled to return to work, Freeman found himself more nervous than he'd been in years. Not nervous about her ability to do the job. Dr. Mitchell had assured him that Maria's recovery was complete, and she was actually in better physical condition than she'd been in years. He was nervous about whether their relationship could return to normal after everything that had happened. Freeman had always prided himself on maintaining appropriate boundaries with employees, treating them with respect and fairness, but avoiding the complications that could arise from becoming too personally involved in their lives. But helping Maria had crossed every one of those boundaries, and he wasn't sure what their dynamic would be now. His concerns proved unnecessary. When Maria walked through his front door at 8 a.m. sharp, moving with an ease and confidence he hadn't seen since her first years of employment, her greeting was warm but professional. "Good morning, Mr. Freeman. I'm ready to get back to work. How are you feeling, Maria?" She smiled, a genuine expression of joy that lit up her entire face. "I feel like myself again. Better than myself, actually. I'd forgotten what it was like to move without planning every step to avoid pain." Freeman watched as she moved through the house, reacquainting herself with the space that had been her second home for so many years. Her movements were fluid, natural, efficient, the way they had been before arthritis had forced her to compensate for constant pain. "Maria, can we talk for a moment before you get started?" She joined him in the kitchen, sitting across from him at the breakfast table where they'd had their life-changing conversation 3 months earlier. "I want to address something that's been on my mind," Freeman began. "I know the last few months have been unusual, and I want to make sure you're comfortable with how we move forward. I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything beyond the excellent work you've always done." Maria nodded thoughtfully. "Mr. Freeman, can I be honest with you about something?" "Of course." "When this all started, I was terrified that accepting your help would change everything between us. I thought maybe you'd expect something different from me, or that I'd feel so indebted that I couldn't just do my job. But you know what I realized during my recovery." "What?" "You didn't help me because you wanted to change our relationship. You helped me because you saw our relationship clearly. You recognized the value of what I brought to your life, and you wanted to preserve it. You weren't trying to make me grateful. You were trying to make me healthy so I could keep being who I've always been." Freeman felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Maria understood exactly what he had hoped she would understand. "There's something else," Maria continued. "The way you handled the media attention, the way you talked about me in that interview, you could have made it about your generosity, but instead you made it about my work ethic. That meant more to me than the surgery itself." Freeman was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "Maria, you've taught me something over these past few months. I always thought the measure of success was what you could achieve for yourself. But watching how your recovery has inspired other people to help their employees, seeing how your story has given dignity to workers everywhere, that's shown me that the real measure of success might be what you can enable other people to achieve." "What do you mean?" "I mean that helping you wasn't just about fixing your hip. It was about showing people that employees like you aren't replaceable commodities. You're valuable human beings whose well-being matters. And apparently, a lot of people needed to hear that message." Maria stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the grounds she'd be caring for again. "Mr. Freeman, there's something I want you to know. Carlos graduated last week with his associate degree. He's transferring to a 4-year university in the fall to study social work. You must be very proud." "I am, but I'm also proud of something else. Yesterday, he told me that his goal is to create a non-profit organization that connects domestic workers with healthcare resources. He wants to call it the Maria Rodriguez Foundation." Freeman felt his eyes well up with tears. The idea that Maria's son was naming his future organization after his mother was profoundly moving. "He said he learned from watching me that hard work has dignity, but he learned from watching you that recognizing that dignity in others is what separates good people from great people." Freeman stood up and joined Maria at the window. "Your son is going to change a lot of lives." "He learned how from the best teacher," Maria replied, looking directly at Freeman. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, both reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. Then Maria straightened up with a slight smile. "Well, Mr. Freeman, this house isn't going to clean itself, and I have 3 months of dust to catch up on." As Freeman watched Maria begin her work, moving efficiently through familiar routines with the pain-free ease she'd been denied for years, he realized that the most extraordinary part of the entire experience wasn't the surgery or the media attention or even the ripple effects of kindness it had inspired. The most extraordinary part was this: a simple recognition that the person who cared for his home was worthy of care herself. Everything else, the headlines, the inspiration to others, the transformation of his community's approach to employee welfare, had flowed from that single moment of seeing Maria Rodriguez not as the housekeeper, but as a complete human being whose dreams and well-being mattered. Freeman returned to his study to work on his latest script, but found himself distracted by the sounds of Maria moving through the house. Confident footsteps, the efficient rhythm of someone who loved her work and could finally do it without pain. It was the sound of a life restored, and it was the most beautiful music he'd ever heard. 1 year after Maria's surgery, Freeman received an invitation that would provide the perfect conclusion to their extraordinary story. Carlos Rodriguez was graduating from the University of Mississippi with his bachelor's degree in social work, and he wanted his mother's employer to be there to witness the moment that had been made possible, in part, by Freeman's compassion. The graduation ceremony was held on a beautiful May morning at the university's outdoor amphitheater. Freeman sat in the audience next to Maria, watching as her son crossed the stage to receive his diploma. When Carlos's name was called, Maria gripped Freeman's hand, tears streaming down her face. "I never thought I'd live to see this day," she whispered. "For so long, I was afraid I'd become a burden to him instead of a support." After the ceremony, Carlos approached them with his diploma in hand and his girlfriend Elena by his side. "Mr. Freeman, I can't thank you enough for being here today and for everything you've done for my family. Carlos, your mother did the hard work. I just removed an obstacle that was in her way." Carlos smiled. "That's exactly the philosophy I want to build my foundation on, that sometimes people just need obstacles removed to achieve extraordinary things." Freeman learned that Carlos had already begun the preliminary work for the Maria Rodriguez Foundation. Working with a professor and several classmates, he had developed a business plan for an organization that would connect domestic workers, food service employees, and other essential workers with healthcare resources, emergency financial assistance, and educational opportunities. "We've identified over 200 potential candidates for assistance just in Mississippi," Carlos explained. "People who are working multiple jobs, caring for families and putting off medical care because they can't afford it. The foundation won't just pay for their medical needs, we'll help them access existing resources they don't know about, connect them with employers who want to help but don't know how, and create a network of support." Elena added, "What's really exciting is that we've already had 3 major employers reach out, wanting to partner with us. They want to do what Mr. Freeman did for Maria, but they need guidance on how to structure the assistance appropriately." Freeman was impressed by the scope and thoughtfulness of their plans. "How can I help?" "We were hoping you'd consider being on our advisory board," Carlos said. "Your name would give us credibility, but more importantly, your experience with Maria's situation would help us guide other employers who want to help their workers." Freeman agreed immediately. Over the following months, he worked closely with Carlos and his team to develop protocols for employer-sponsored medical assistance that protected both workers and employers while ensuring that help reached the people who needed it most. The foundation officially launched 6 months later with a fundraising gala that drew attendees from across the entertainment industry, business community, and social service sector. Freeman gave the keynote address, but the most powerful moment came when Maria took the stage to introduce her son. "A year and a half ago, I was working in constant pain, afraid to tell my employer about my condition because I thought it would cost me my job," Maria began, her voice strong and clear. "Today I'm pain-free. My son is starting an organization that will help thousands of people like me, and I've learned that sometimes the most extraordinary things happen when ordinary people choose compassion over indifference." She paused, looking directly at Freeman in the audience. "Mr. Freeman, you didn't just give me my health back. You gave me hope back. You showed my son that there are people in the world who will recognize the value of hard work and human dignity. And you proved to me that asking for help isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of trust." The foundation's first year exceeded all expectations. They provided medical assistance to 127 essential workers, helped 43 people access educational opportunities, and created partnerships with 15 major employers who implemented comprehensive employee assistance programs. Freeman remained deeply involved, using his platform to raise awareness about the challenges facing working-class families and the ways that employers could make meaningful differences in their employees' lives. But he was careful always to center the stories of the workers themselves, not his role in helping them. 2 years after Maria's surgery, Freeman was honored with a humanitarian award from the National Domestic Workers Alliance. In his acceptance speech, he reflected on what the experience had taught him. "I've spent my career telling other people's stories, bringing characters to life on screen. But the most important story I've ever been part of wasn't fiction at all. It was the simple recognition that Maria Rodriguez and millions of workers like her deserved to have their dignity acknowledged and their well-being protected." He concluded with words that would be quoted in social work textbooks and corporate training programs for years to come. "True wealth isn't measured by what you can afford to buy. It's measured by what you can afford to give away. And the greatest gift you can give isn't money. It's the recognition that every person who contributes to your life has value that extends far beyond their job description." After the ceremony, Freeman and Maria drove back to his estate together, as they had countless times over the years. The house looked exactly as it always had, immaculately maintained by someone who took genuine pride in her work. But everything had changed. Maria no longer moved through the space with the careful calculation of someone managing pain. Freeman no longer took for granted the dedication of the person who cared for his home. And somewhere in Mississippi, Carlos Rodriguez was working late into the night, reviewing applications from workers who needed help, following in the footsteps of an employer who had seen his mother's worth and a mother who had never stopped believing that hard work and dignity would eventually be recognized. The story that had begun with a limp and a moment of compassion had become something larger, a testament to the transformative power of recognizing the humanity in the people whose labor makes our lives possible, and a reminder that sometimes the most profound acts of kindness are simply seeing people clearly and responding to what they need. Freeman fell asleep that night to the sound of Maria humming while she worked, the same contented melody she'd hummed for years, but now without the pauses that used to punctuate it when pain became too much to bear. It was the sound of a life restored, a dignity recognized, and a future made possible by the simple decision to care about another person's well-being. And in homes and workplaces across the country, other employers were learning to listen for the sounds of their own employees' struggles, inspired by a story that proved that extraordinary change could begin with something as simple as noticing when someone you depend on needs help and choosing to provide it.